And at the same time, there are a few foundational things that I want to make sure to set up for you. And let me give you a quick outline so that I can also for myself hold myself to a quick outline. I first want to talk a little bit about where we come from, the programming that we come into adulthood with, and just map that out really quickly. And then I want to talk about how this particular communication model walks us into a different place and how we might use that. Okay. So generally when we come into communication, and I also want to tell you communication is far more than words. I know you all know this, but I still want to emphasize the fact that you are never not communicating. The only thing you are ever doing in some way is communicating and listening. And words are a minor piece of it. They are also going to be a very powerful piece for transforming what's happening. But your body language, your facial expression, your tone of voice, whether or not you are in your very being constricted and tense and feeling rigid, or absolutely relaxed and comfortable in your own being, is communicating to other people all the time. And that's a fundamental thing that we're trying to get to when we're practicing the language of compassion, that we look at communication as a whole body experience and a whole body felt sense experience of one another. So there are many, many parts that become important to be aware of. So most of us come into dialogue. I'm going to jump into this just with sort of a dialogue practice. You've talked a little bit this morning about some situations that you've had a hard time with. And so I want to go and talk to this other person about some problem that I have usually, right? Something has happened. I have some feelings about it. I don't like the way it's going. And so I'm going to sit down with you and have a conversation with you about this problem that I have. And most of us are trained to move into relationship and into dialogue through the frame of what is wrong. And we tend to think through the frame of what is wrong. I'm feeling something, something must be wrong. And then my problem solver comes in, because if something is wrong, I need to figure out in my mind what is wrong. And generally, I'm overgeneralizing, but it's going to be either there's something wrong with me or there's something wrong with you. Right? I mean, generally, it sort of boils down to these two things. And so if I have now evaluated that there's something wrong with me, what that means is that a lot of self-judgment is getting activated for me. I am beginning to tell myself a story about myself. And it may be that I'm too depressed, I'm too anxious, I'm too passive, I'm too introverted, I'm too reactive, I'm too angry, I'm too aggressive. We have a lot of things that we were given as children about who we are, and we've internalized them, and then they kick in, and so I've got a lot of theories about all of the things that are wrong with me, and then I'm likely to feel more depressed, or I'm likely to feel more anxious. And if I do this a lot, I'm going to see a lot more learned helplessness. And generally, I'm suffering. Because a lot of evaluations of what is wrong with me have gotten activated. And this is when I see people coming to therapy, right? Because they've decided something is wrong with them, and then we treat ourselves like projects that need to be fixed, and we present ourselves to experts who are supposed to know how to fix us, which in some ways perpetuates the very problem that is bringing us in. If I think that there's something wrong with you, because really I did it perfectly this time because I've been to a training and I said it right for once, and so the problem is your reaction, because you're reacting the way you always did, and I'm the only one changing here, so I'm fine and you're not, right? Then I'm likely to feel, if I think that you are the problem, I am likely to feel more angry, and I'm likely to feel more self-righteous. And there we swing in our relationships, in simple terms. I'm either angry and feeling self-righteous because I'm right this time, and therefore you need to change, and I'm going to educate you in all the things that I want you to change. And the way that I try and get you to change is by telling you what's wrong with you. Right? And if you would only do it like this, that, and the next thing, then finally we would have a good relationship. And we long for the other person to one day say to us, "You're right. That was really helpful. Thank you for the awareness. I didn't see all of these things about myself before. I now know what to do. I will change." Generally, we don't get that reaction from other people. What we stimulate instead is a lot of defensiveness. This is sounding familiar? Okay. So this model that most of us come into adulthood with isn't working well because we have inherited a language of domination, essentially. This is domination language. And domination functions in a power hierarchy where somebody is going to be right, which means that somebody needs to be wrong. Somebody is going to be healthy, which means somebody needs to be unhealthy. Somebody has access to resources, which means somebody else does not have access to resources. And what happens is it sets us up to feel like we need to compete with one another and jockey for position and prove our worthiness a lot in our relationships. It makes it very difficult to relax with one another. You with me so far? Okay. Domination language stimulates defensiveness and disconnection between people. And there's, Marshall Rosenberg talks about a specific categories of language that are likely to increase disconnection from one another and that are likely to make it difficult for us to get the kind of intimacy, understanding, and connection that we're often wanting. One of them is diagnosing one another. So we use the language of diagnosis. I'll tell you that the problem with you is that you're narcissistic. That is my diagnosis of you. You are too selfish, and therefore that's where our problem is, so you need to go and get fixed. Okay? Another one is, so we have diagnosis is one, making demands of other people, where I tell you that you don't have any choice. You have to go and clean your room. And the reason you have to do it is because you just have to learn how to clean your room because one day you're going to be a grown-up and running your own house, and these are just things people have to do. Every time that we use have to language, must language, should language, and we make demands of other people, we are setting up a power struggle. Because when I tell you you have to do something, I'm only giving you two choices. You can rebel or you can submit. Right? You can say, yes, fine, I'll do it, or no, I'm not going to. And if I've made a demand and you don't really feel like you have a lot of choice and you choose to submit to me, I am going to pay for that submission later. Is that making sense? Because this is not given willingly. It's actually coming with some toxic degree of resentment. And even if it's really, really minor, if our relationship is characterized by demands and have-tos and what you need to do for me, then it's going to build up over time, and we're going to increasingly feel resentful of the things that we actually would like to enjoy doing. You know, for example, when I was a kid, I still do actually, all my life, I love reading. I can devour books. I can sit in a room and I can read books all day long and be incredibly energized at the end of it. It is one of my very favorite things to do. But once I went through school, and especially in high school, where you get your list of the books you have to read, it was the most torturous, painful thing in the world for me to read those books, even though I intrinsically adore reading and a wide variety of kinds of books. But the moment you tell me you have to read it and you have to read these pages on this day, it's taken the joy of reading out for me. And then what I have inside of me is nothing but a ton of resentment and resistance to doing this thing. And it's unfortunate because I actually have a lot of intrinsic motivation that some of my high school teachers would never have known about, given my behaviors in their classes of not doing my reading and not being prepared for discussion. So when we tell one another things that we have to do and we take away choice for a human being, that leads to some kind of disconnection, often an internal one. The other kind of language is denial of choice. And you see this in a domination system. It's extremely dangerous language. Because denial of choice is when we hear things like, I was a teacher for many, many years, and so I'd find myself saying things like, you know, there's nothing I can do about this because this is just school policy. So I'm going to enact some rule or some consequence or some punishment, usually in a school, and really I can dole it out, but then if I see the kid in pain, I have no responsibility. You know, I'm just doing my job. I'm just doing what I was told to do. Very, very dangerous language if we're going to be studying compassion or the study of nonviolence and peacemaking in the world. Because it puts us in a position where internally we get disconnected from our own power. We forget that we have the power to choose in any given moment the things we're wanting to support and the things we're not wanting to support. And it puts us in a mind frame where we are able to enact things that if we were really in touch with our hearts, we wouldn't be enacting.